Радиоактивно, подиум закрыт. Плавучая АЭС, вход с Бэй-4. Разрешение силуэта, уровень 3, контроль зоны. Сегодня вечером мы моделируем контроль. She walks in isotope mesh, button shaped like fuel caps, ACM hemline fluttering low. Her heels were borrowed from Obninsk, first light, last rides, all eyes forward, no blinking. Threaded in protocol, pressed with approval codes, modeled once, deployed forever. That's not fabric, it's policy. Wardrobe by Rosatom, cut from silence, styled in decay, cleared for distribution. She walks in authorization layers, where's the delay? Wardrobe by Rosatom, never modeled twice. Model 8177 enters from Chelyabinsk. Her outfit cooled in secrecy. Velcro seams like sarcophagus locks. A clutch lined with IAEA inspection tags. Her expression irrelevant, her posture fully funded, no stitching permitted. All garments must self-contain. Your signature confirms understanding. This pattern was never approved. Wardrobe by Rosatom, tailored in trust, styled for liquidation, modeled under oath. Wardrobe by Rosatom, a look that won't expire, just irradiate. Mayak diamonds in the sleeves, graphite rolled off at the cuffs. A sash labeled future optional, no lining, no commentary. Only weight, only fabric with memory. By Rosatom, cut from silence, styled in decay, cleared for distribution. She walks in authorization layers, where's the delay? Wardrobe by Rosatom, never modeled twice. Containment complete. No garment survives inspection.
Hello, welcome to the madness. That's a classic right there. People might not realize it right now, but that is revolutionary stuff. Speaking of stuff, so I'm going to lower the dose rates, the acceptable dose rates for women and children and the species and the planet. Well, they're not going to, they have. And I'm going to explain some of this, why we have those. Hi, Dana. Hope you're doing good, buddy. I'm just going to jump over it. Jump over it. That was interesting. Jump over to the pole somewhere. You can call in 709. We're in Canada, 740-4076. 709-740-4076. Considering that the small modular reactors are actually phantom reactors, they don't exist, is easing the safety rules for unproven small modular reactor nuclear technology reckless? It's not the word for it. It's just absurd that we're even having this conversation. I'm a little behind on this story. Excuse me. I don't know. That's the wrong one. This one. I have wanted to do the show for the last couple of weeks. Haven't been able to get it done due to emaciated worldwide, due to radioactive fallout. Now they want to just relax the rules. Federal Nuclear Agency moves to relax the radiation exposure. That was on the 1st of the month, so 3 weeks ago. I've been sick for almost 5 weeks now. That certainly wears you out, eh? Had a few setbacks today trying to get equipment running, but I'm kind of demoralized at this stage, but I'll bounce back when I wake up, hopefully. The proposed change which would end a requirement that plants limit workers' radiation exposures to as low as reasonably achievable. That kind of discrepancy is pretty vast. And there's no nuclear safety advocates that are quoted in the media. There's just a controlled opposition. So they're going to use controlled opposition to give you another narrative, and which is a trap. You're walking into a trap. The Washington Post, democracy dies in the darkness. Really? Democracy dies in the darkness. I've been doing this 25 years, and we've been running this show for 15 years. Presentations. I'm in the dark. I got 8 wonderful viewers, 9 likes, 8 votes. That's the definition of dark. And the American Constitution wasn't founded on democracy. Democracy is nowhere to be found. It was a republic where everybody had equal rights. Nobody can take it away. And democracies where 51% can take away the rights of 49%, and they did and do. And to show you this picture here, Browns Ferry, 2011. It's an interesting choice for 2011. I think a more appropriate picture would have been, say, this one here in Fukushima Prefecture, 2011. Why don't I show you that one? Excuse me. Because that doesn't work for their crazy narrative, right? Why didn't they show you this picture here? Fukushima Reactor 3, well, what's left of it. And there's 9 reactors at the top of the buildings. They're gone. Each of those reactors were equal to over 100 Chernobyls. Because it was pure uranium, plutonium. It was massive reactor cores. It had decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings. They covered it up successfully. Workers at nuclear power plants could be exposed to higher levels of radiation under a proposal by the federal nuclear regulators to loosen safety limits. First off, and that's what I mean, let me explain that part actually. Because madness doesn't come in spoonfuls. Madness is the main dish for humanity. So every nuclear power plant has a pretty interesting attribute that is symmetrical. Let me find the best picture. Is there such a thing as a best picture? I wonder. Oh, that'll work. So this is a satellite. This is a normal picture of a nuclear power plant. It's surrounded by farms. Farms are all the way up to the boundaries and then across it, around it. Now, if you go to Google Satellite and you zoom back even further, this is the same plant. It's surrounded by farms. if you go back even further, zoom out even further, what do you see? Nothing but farms. That's your typical nuclear power plant. And a nuclear power plant has decades of reactor cores stored for each reactor on site. Now, it's each reactor, and say there's 30 reactor cores, 40 reactor cores on an average site, like after 30 years. We're way down the road now, so say 45, 50 reactor cores minimum on a site. And so that's, each reactor core still producing isotopes, splitting atoms to power 1 million homes and businesses, but it's no longer in a containment. And they keep it underwater. And each reactor, not site, but each reactor needs 2 separate fuel pools. And they could have, at this stage, 15, 20 reactor cores into it. So that's splitting atoms for 15 to 20 million homes directly into all of those farms. And it's vented up the tall, skinny stacks at the site. See that tall, skinny stack? I think that's a bad picture, but can we see one at this site? No. I got another picture. Don't worry, I'll make my point here in a second. This is Fukushima on the 15th of March, 2011, day 5. 4 reactors, and there's 2 fuel pools at the top of each reactor, they're gone. Each, you see those tall, skinny stacks? There's another one, there's another one. Why are they all situated right close to those reactors? Well, those tall, skinny stacks are venting the radioactive fallout from the fuel pools that were at the top. There was around 36 reactor cores lost here. Each of them were equal to over 100 Chernobyls. You're talking around 4,000 Chernobyls released into the environment. So the worker, relaxing rules at the plant's not going to make any difference because the fuel pools are the issue, not the reactor. The reactor's contained. Right, so get you looking over here instead of where you should be looking. Don't worry, it'll make sense for you in a second. So we're still talking about this. Here we go, one more sentence to get through. In line with an executive order from Trump's administration, Trump didn't make these rules. The administration did, the pro-nuclear community did, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, which is appointed by that administration did, to speed up approval of new nuclear facilities. Yeah, well, you'll speed up the approval. That doesn't mean they're going to build it. They've had every opportunity. They have an endless, they have blank checks. They can, all the money they want. And it'll come out of the consumers' pockets ultimately, right? They'll just keep jacking the rates up till it's built. So the consumer bills will perpetually be expensive every time you look at nuclear. There's some pretty big setbacks today. I'm exhausted. I'm not beaten yet. I'm just exhausted. I wasn't going to do a show tonight, but I started to come around about an hour ago, and I said, well, we'll go for it. Okay. Stop talking about me. No one cares about you. Well, 11 people do. Do you care what I got to say? Federal Nuclear Agency moves to relax radiation exposure rules. Well, like if you get rid of all the rules, you're not going to change the exposure coming out of the fuel pools up those tall, skinny stacks 24 hours a day. Each pool, and you're talking about, say if this was another site with 4 reactor buildings that weren't melted down or blown up and caught fire and blew up and everything else, and lost 30 years of inventories, which are around 36 reactor cores. The fuel pools are the issue, not the reactor. Right? That's how they keep you divided, talking about a reactor, which is a containment. I don't give a shit about the reactor. These fuel pools are a death sentence, particularly because every nuclear power site, except for a couple, are surrounded by farms as far as you can see. Is that going to change the radioactive fallout around into all those farms? No, it's still going to be an absurd amount of radioactive fallout. So each fuel pool is going to boil off minimum, it could be double and triple the numbers I'm going to give you, 120,000 liters out of each fuel pool. So at the top of each building is 250,000 liters in 24 hours evaporated, and each liter is saturated with isotope because the fuel rods become very brittle, and on the microscopic level, which is the important facet of it, is going to have trillions of microscopic cracks into it. And that's why they can't keep it in a reactor for more than 12, 14, 16 months. They start taking it out because if it breaks open, then all hell's going to break loose for the industry. So they take it out and put it in the fuel pool. It's only about 3% of its energy was consumed, so to speak. So it's still incredibly active. And it's splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses per reactor core. So a typical site would have 36 million, the same amount of isotopes. So think about how many atoms do you got to split to boil a glass of water? How many atoms do you got to split to boil a glass of water for 1 million people at breakfast time? It's absurd. How many atoms are you going to split just to make this boil? You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But a single one can invoke a cancer, an autoimmune illness, a disease, etc., etc., etc. Catastrophic lifetime consequences. And there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger that can defend against the anthropogenic man-made isotopes. Sheep farmers are stuck under a Chernobyl cloud. And this was about, so think about sheep farmers, and this is really fun. You like this one. They closed, it wasn't in total almost 9,000 farms, it was 9,400 farms were placed under restriction. And so the government would just kept the sheep farmers farming, but they would buy the sheep and kill them, and then they would incinerate them and release the isotopes back into the environment. And they've done this for decades. And slowly they only looked for cesium, allegedly. They didn't look for anything. They only acknowledged cesium, but the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods is not cesium. It's something much more insidious. So the fuel pools at every nuclear power plant are releasing several million liters a day into your farms and your communities and your biosphere and your ecosystem. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing that. And they have decades of reactor cores. Each one of them are splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. And it's not in a containment, it's out in the exposed environment. It's a snuff machine to snuff out our planet. And the average person is completely complacent, incapable of comprehending the enormity of just that statement. Too many facets, right? The SpongeBob, the Simpsons, Spider-Man, the Hulk. In total, almost 9,000 farms and 4 million sheep were placed under restriction. Almost 9,000 farms. 9,400 farms. So then the question is, does radiation only seek out farms? No. And does it only seek out sheep farms? No. It meant every farm should have been closed, and which means you should abandon Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. Now to get there, this was up to 3,000 kilometers away. So it had to contaminate all of Europe to get to Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. So how can you... It's not like you had a little plume and it floated over and then it came down and landed in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. The plume covers the entire planet. And every fuel pool is releasing an equal plume of that each year, of Chernobyl. And every day it's creating a plume that covers the whole planet. And this is why we see the diversity. Our planet would be amazing if the nuclear industry didn't exist. Excuse me. Okay, I still got to finish this off because it's hard to comprehend the implications of this. Oh, but close the farms where everything is safe. No, that's simply not true. I got a really good way of articulating that it's foolproof, and no matter who you are, you'll get it. La 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 la. Oh yeah, I got a couple of folders. Just, it's meant to, how would you put it? It's meant to overwhelm the apologist. Oh crap. Not good. Bear with me. Looks like they give it to me. Now, if I happen to disappear in the next few minutes, come back in 5 minutes. Keep the same page. I'll show back up here. And you got to realize the equipment that I got, look, I'm frozen up. You might be able to hear my voice, but right now my whole system is frozen up. Anybody want to tell me what they're seeing on their side? 709. If you can hear my voice. Can you hear the words coming out of my mouth? I'm going to restart, I guess. 709-740-4076. I'll be able to see your comments actually in the chat room. Okay, I'm just going to reboot. This is very unusual what we're looking at right now. In my face. I'll be right back in about 5 minutes. Okay, we should be back. There we are. Kind of. There we are. I can see you. Can you see me? Let me just do a recap. Yeah, hi Dana. Colette. Tinker. Let me just do a recap because when I repost this video, the context will be gone because the recording that I started off with will be gone. Federal agency moved to relax radiation exposures rules. And they show you that picture right here, but they should have showed you in 2011. They should have showed you this picture for 2011 and this picture. Because then their narrative doesn't work, right? And so you're not worried about radiation levels from the reactors because it's contained. And one thing about a reactor, when you look at reactors, you're typically going to see it surrounded by farms. And as you zoom out from a satellite, you'll notice absurd amount of farms. If you keep zooming out, then you're going to notice 96% of nuclear power plants will look like this. And what's going on is the emissions from each of these buildings is around 8 or 9 reactor cores, in particular because they're 30 years old. Reactors currently, most are much older. And so they keep all the inventories, all the reactor cores on site. And they take out about a third every 14, 15 months and put it in a fuel pool. The fuel pools have no containment, and each of them boil off about 120,000, or double or triple that, liters a day. And each liter is going to be saturated with isotopes because the buildings, the fuel is taken up because it's brittle. There's only 3% consumed, so to speak, or useful energy is used up. So it's 97% of volatility is still there, still producing massive isotopes into the environment. So each reactor core is still boiling, is still producing the atoms to boil 1 million gallons or power for 1 million homes and businesses every second. And so you're talking about 8 or 9 reactor cores at the top of the buildings. That's 30 million homes and businesses of isotopes being released up those tall, skinny stacks. Okay. And so Chernobyl, for instance, to give you an idea how crazy this stuff actually is, the fallout, when they had their so-called nuclear meltdown, which was covered up successfully, it came out that United Kingdom, Ireland, Scotland closed 9,000, it was not almost 9,000 farms, 9,400 farms, sheep farms. And radiation doesn't just look for sheep. And it doesn't look for anything. If it covered those farms, it covered the entire country. So all your drinking water, all your school playgrounds. It's a bummer, I know, but that's what happened. And so radiation fallout has been going on for 80 years straight. I'm not worried about the reactor. I'm worried about the fuel pools that are hammering your planet. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Okay, we're back to where we left off. And okay, I know where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, I never seen it freeze up like that before, the way you've done it tonight. We have pretty impressive equipment. We have the same stuff a TV studio we uses, the same equipment. And the idea of such extravagant equipment, which is inherently harder to use, by the way, because it takes 5 people to run the equipment. I'd have to run it on my own. I do a pretty good job. I'm not perfect, though. I'm not bad, actually, am I? Okay, this is where I'm supposed to be, right there. And so I'm going to go and show you some studies that'll help you understand why, and we'll talk about the poll for a second, why radioactive fallout is such a nightmare. And every fuel pool is a radioactive fallout, perpetual. And you can't destroy it, and it's soaked up by your fields and your forests. So every time you have a forest fire, you're most likely liberating isotopes for the last 80 years into the environment. You can't destroy it in a forest fire or an incinerator. I'm not sure if this is the right folder. It'll work. It's a bit big, actually, so we're not going to get through all of that. Good God, it's a huge folder. Let me just go backwards. There we go. One more try. We got back. So I want to explain. So it made it all the way to Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom, and it must have done some damage along the way, you would hope. Or not hope, but you would imagine. They closed the freshwater fishery in Switzerland for 30 years. Okay, that folder's a lot smaller than that. The other one was like a 200 study. I might go back and do that one anyway, but I'm just kidding. It was hard to say because it's a very important subject and we only get one kick at the can. The influence of post-Chernobyl fallout on birth defects and abortion rates in Austria. So to get to Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom, it didn't just like go in a straight line. Let me show you what radioactive fallout how it works first, because that'll give you better context to extrapolate on your own. Okay, so this is the French government model based on a spike in the United States and Canada. I'll just bring that in also. These are educational programs. These are educational programs. government radiation levels in the United States West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal after Fukushima explosions. Spiked. See the second sentence up there? This is the IRSM, which is the French government's experts on nuclear radiation risk, and the Ministry of Defense of the Environment and Industry Research. And so they found documentation in the United States of 1 million to 10 million atoms, or times what it was pre-Fukushima. Now, pre-Fukushima, I'd like to say radioactive fallout is weapons left over from weapons testing. That's not true, because you got 1,000 fuel pools on the planet. Each fuel pool at this stage got 5 or 10 reactor cores. So it's still splitting atoms for 5 to 10 million people every day, every 24 hours. And that plume is going to cover your planet. And this is what, if you had no nuclear on the planet, right? Let's say there was never any nuclear on this planet. And the numbers we're talking about are, because this model is based on numbers in America, but it's applicable to a fuel pool. So think of this as a fuel pool first. This is Fukushima radioactive fallout over 30 days. Think of it as a snowstorm, and think of radioactive fallout, though, as snow that never melts and never goes away, never stops snowing. So it wouldn't take, after 30 days, you can't see the roof of your house, for instance. At the end of 60 days, it's twice the height of your house. At the end of 90 days, it's 3 times the height of your house. Then you'd get it really quick, right? But because you can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or touch it or perceive it, that doesn't mean this is not as catastrophic. It's just that it plays out differently on you. The health consequences are much more severe. But this is for every species, all 8 million species. And right away, all species within 2 weeks, and then for the rest of our lives now, are producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells. And then the health consequences of that, and thank God they kicked me off the stream there earlier. I wouldn't have thought about that facet, so that works in our favor. So this is based on a spike in the United States of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And cesium, each atom is pulsing energy up to 600 feet every second in every direction. And this is a gamma. Now there's gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. When they hit each other, they change direction. That creates an X-ray. So all species are also, and all humans, are getting full body X-rays every second. Now the plume, the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel, which is, that's where they cut me off, right? When I was looking for that. So let's grab that. The biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel is the plutonium. It's not plutonium. Now we'll go back to that in 1 second. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct in the radioactive fuel. So the fuel in the fuel pools, the biggest emitters coming out of the fuel pools, up those tall skinny stacks, is curium isotopes. Curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium in U.S. Navy Research Institute, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, when applied to beagle dogs and puppies, in this particular study was 144, and like all the other studies, the animals all died from multiple tumors. Bone tumors, 93 dogs were the most common cause of death out of 144, and then lung tumors in 46, and liver tumors. So competing tumors causing death. The findings in the dogs suggested similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans. But it actually, what they're omitting is that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than an animal kidney at removing the plutonium. So human are 50 times more vulnerable, and 50 times more likely to die than the dogs, and the dogs all died. And bone tumors are a terrible way to die, and my heart goes out to the victims that suffered that. But, and there's an awful amount of plutonium produced, right? and covered our planet. Curium isotopes are the major byproduct, and they need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. Plutonium killed all the animals. So when we talk about cesium coming up here for the next little bit, and iodine, stuff like that, just remember plutonium killed all the dogs, curium is the major byproduct, and curium needs lead shielding 20 times thicker, and that humans are 50 times less efficient than the animals at removing the isotopes. So you're 50 times more vulnerable to heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia, for instance. Your immune system is immediately compromised, and so you're producing a perpetual amount of white blood cells, which displaces your red blood cells permanently. The influence of the post-Chernobyl fallout on birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. So Chernobyl radioactive fallout, in order to get to Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, where it closed 9,400 farms, according to them, traveled across Europe, right? But as you can see, this is 20 days in. It covers the whole planet. It doesn't just travel a little plume to Europe. It covers the whole planet right away in 20 days or less. Now, all the shakers and movers, this was the French government, all the shakers and movers worldwide are producing very similar or exact types models for all kinds of different isotopes. And just let me make sure that you're able to appreciate that. And I think that's a very effective thing to do for everybody, because you're trying to do something good by educating the population so they can't be hoodwinked and manipulated and deceived and coerced and victimized. And that'll help with the studies I'm about to show you. So, think about this Neptunium-239. That's got a 2.5 day half-life. There's 10 half-lives. And each half-life decays to a different isotope. So the next one is Plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. So that model is 20 days and 21 days. All of it becomes Plutonium-239 at 25 days. These numbers are based on venting from TEPCO, not the spike like the French study was. That's okay though. So in this same plume of cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air is the plutonium saturated the entire planet, and neptunium. There's 3 isotopes. And neptunium's nasty, by the way. And this is the xenon, 133, and it'll travel with many other isotopes, including krypton-85. There's 5 isotopes. 20 million particles of iodine-131 is absurd numbers, and that's going to be in the same plume. So that plume is going to have all of these isotopes we're talking about. But for every iodine-131 is 10 times more 132, with 30 times more 133, with 31 times more iodine-129. And that the 132, 133 are 9 times more effective than the 131, which is incredibly effective ionizing, irradiating the thyroid glands of all species, which means permanent radioactive hormones. So that's 9. This is a sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. These are super hot particles. And we're talking about half a trillion per kilogram. So you got to multiply that by 66.6 to get a square meter. Just lost my train of thoughts here. That's 10. Sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs are the salt water that was used to spray on the reactors because 1,200 miles of the coastline was washed away. There was no infrastructure, right? No power supplies or anything like that. No electricities, no extension cords you can plug in. That's a joke. It's a sad one, but it's a joke. And so the sulfur forms a buckyball, and they're called sulfur buckyballs. And then because of the way they ingest the isotopes, they can ingest an isotope inside, like a cocoon, right? Inside the sulfur buckyball structure, spherical structures. Think of like a soccer ball type configuration. And they're very mobile, and they're not soluble in water per se. And they can travel vast distances without the jet streams, for instance. And, you know, like, you ever clean your house perfect? And it's a sunny day, and you look at the window, and you can see this beam of light, and there's just nothing but dust particles. Well, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle you can't see, but each one can trigger an autoimmune illness or disease or deficiency or injury or illness in a species or humans. Significant consequences for human health. So the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, in other words, are super hot particles. Let me keep going. That's 10, right? That's 10 isotopes. Very high concentrations of hot particles of plutonium americium, very high concentration. This is actually considered a low concentration. Anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout is the only emitter that can make plumes that covers the entire planet. No other emitter does that. And the so-called fabled issue, which is carbon is more birds, more insects, more whales, more pizzas, more puppies, more plants, more trees, more fruit, more biota. Why would carbon be a problem? It's idiotic, and they socially engineered people to the point where they're idiotic, right? It's not their fault, per se. Let me get back down. This was the Xenon 132, that was the CC-137. This was another one, Xenon, 450,000 tons above, persisted for weeks. And this one here. So this will get you up to speed. U.S. state hit with extremely large peaks of plutonium. Radioactivity from the plant, from the nuclear meltdowns. What would you call a plant instead of nuclear meltdowns? Measured globally and blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. Blanketed the entire northern hemisphere. This is the French government's of just cesium-137. So, and this is the biggest byproduct is curium isotopes, right? And they need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. And humans are 50 times less efficient than an animal, and the animals all died in the studies. That was the U.S. Navy studies. So every isotope I mentioned coming up, curium isotopes is the appropriate one. It doesn't matter alpha, it's the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel is what really matters. It matters, but it's a very subtle way of confusing people, the way they frame that grammar. The influence of post-Chernobyl fallout and birth defects and abortion rates in Austria. So to get to Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom, they acknowledge they've done this much damage that I'm going to show you. Trends in human sex odds at birth in Europe in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant accident. Prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Czech Republic. That don't mean that's all it was. That means you just had that many, so they've done a study on it. And one of the most common studies, there's a couple of common, the first studies they're going to do is, obviously, is going to be autism and Down syndrome, right? Newborn babies. And that's what you'll see for every accident. And they'll find it. They might not release it publicly, but they'll find it. But you can extrapolate so much just from these ticker tape type studies. Depictions, right? Secondary sex ratio and trends in associated gender-specific births in nuclear facilities, not meltdowns, but just nuclear facilities. So in order to quantify sex ratio studies, which is more males than females, more males means less babies, right? And it can't be true for humans without being true for the species. And it's always, you always got to remember this is, they're framing it as humans, but it's the species. There's 8 million more species than there is human species. We're all in the same boat. Secondary sex ratio trends in associated gender-specific birth rates And so there's a lot of studies, including Europe and worldwide after nuclear testing, which was a war, right? The radioactive fallout is the same. It doesn't matter. You call it testing, it's still radioactive fallout. And it was a lot of it. So like the biggest American was equal to over 1,000 Nagasaki's of radioactive fallout. The biggest Russian was equal to 4,000 Nagasaki's of so-called Nagasaki radioactive fallout, 15 kiloton. Hopefully this is making sense. Non-thyroid cancer. So they like to frame the narrative as there's not an increase of thyroid cancers. But because every species is producing radioactive stem cells for the rest of their lives post-nuclear industry, and particularly at the pulse event at Fukushima, you got to consider the implications of all species producing radioactive hormones, which regulates all the functions of the bodies. And the development, like humans, are 25 years of development, but insects and birds and mammals and animals are just 1 year. So it's going to manifest quite quickly in them because they're producing babies every year, right? And it's supposed to be 46 million migratory birds here right now raising their fledglings, and then next month and the month after there'll be over the fledglings and the 46 million birds will be leaving. That would be a couple of 100 million birds flying out of here, and people. There's not even a flock in the sky. They haven't showed up. The cliffs now are no longer stained with excrement. That means it's been gone for 7-8 years. This is catastrophic implications. Let's get rolling. So, congenital abnormality registry in Belarus. Congenital abnormality. I'm going to show you a couple pictures. They're hard to look at, but you can't learn anything if you don't look at it. And the nuclear industry has ignored the victims, left them. They don't even have a TV or a radio. And because that's what they want. If you ask them what would they like, that's what they generally will tell you, right? You'll see what I mean here in a second. These are not... This shouldn't be that hard tonight. I don't get that at all. Oh, there it is. Well, the problem is we got too much, right? I always find this stuff a little hard on me. But the reality of it is how hard is it on the people and the victims, right? You'll see. Okay, so congenital abnormalities, there's hundreds of orphanages abandoned, full of abandoned children post-Chernobyl. So this is why you don't want to be... So the reason you're seeing the health consequences we see today, like autism and Down syndrome, stuff like this, is because our food and our water and our air has been poisoned for so long. But at ground zero, you see all these children, they don't have even toys, they have nothing. They have like one nurse for 30 or 40 of these victims. These are the victims of Chernobyl. And there's a foundation in Ireland. And if you go and watch Chernobyl Hearts, these people are part of that group, I believe. They go to Chernobyl and they pay for open heart surgery to alleviate some of these congenital malformations. They even take some of the children back to Ireland, Scotland, to give them the first time they ever felt any kind of normality in their lives. It's very difficult stuff to look at, I know. But this is the effect of radioactive emissions from nuclear power plants too. And you can't understand it without looking at it. Okay, back to the studies, and there's pictures coming up. Fallout from Chernobyl accident and overall cancer incidences in Finland. So it didn't just contaminate Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom's sheep farms, is what I'm trying to show you. Down syndrome time clustering in January in Belarus linked with Chernobyl. Well, it was severe Down syndrome, severe congenital heart diseases. And heart diseases after Fukushima, and let me bring up that study. You're not worried about the lower, you can't lower the dose from the fuel pools around nuclear power plants. Right, so they're not talking about fuel pools. They won't tell you fuel pools are splitting atoms. No. Oh, we take it out of the reactor core and we put it in a pool and it doesn't split atoms anymore. Oh, okay. The reason it's dangerous, fuel is dangerous, is because it's splitting atoms directly into the environment for millions of years. This is why they're trying to build, or their only solution is deep underground geological repositories, which they're not building because they don't want to do it. And this doesn't just attack humans. This attacks every species and your loved ones and your friends. It doesn't just attack the people you don't like. It attacks you. Let me just actually keep going here. Or I was supposed to get a study of something now, I can't remember. Belarus exposed to the photo. I can't remember the study I was about to go get. Chernobyl fallout and prenatal mortality, England and Wales. So they were trying to blame the radioactive fallout from Windscale, which they changed the name to Sellafield, which was a plutonium mixed oxide breeder reactor that melted down in 1957. It's still hemorrhaging into the Atlantic Ocean today and forever. Chernobyl fallout prenatal mortalities in England and Wales. Chromosome aberrations, Norwegian reindeer. So it wasn't just Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom. It was ultimately the entire planet. The radioactive fallout ultimately covers the entire planet, right? And it doesn't take only 20, 30 days for every depiction, every model, every projection, every study of the actual disposition of radioactive fallout is the same as this from all the shakers and movers worldwide. 23 days of radioactive fallout right here. So officially nothing got out of that building. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. That was a 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter building. And when you look at that, you're seeing around 9 reactor cores ejected right out of the buildings. Now it's no longer underwater. The zirconium cladding, when exposed to air, is going to ignite immediately. Remember the old zirconium flashes they used to use for cameras in the 20s? Those great big flashes. A little hammer would go up and break the glass, and the oxygen would rush in, and zirconium cladding would flash. It's the same stuff they're putting on the fuel. So this was a pressure explosion from the pressure, right? Now that was enhanced by the isotopes. Right? They use depleted uranium for fracking with the explosives. So they got a kilogram of explosive. They'll put in say 3 or 4 grams of depleted uranium. That'll make it 6 times more powerful or something. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. It's probably a lot more than that. But so you can imagine the particulates inside the buildings. And then the pressure build up. These are already enormous temperatures running at high pressure. They need 4,500 tons of water a minute. So you can imagine how that plays out over a period of time. It's like putting an air hose on your car tire and walking away. You know what's going to happen, right? Everything go boom, boom. Estimated lifetime effective doses to hunters and their families in the 3 most contaminated counties in Sweden after Chernobyl. They closed the freshwater fishery in Chernobyl or Sweden for 30 years after Chernobyl. And Fukushima happened, he said, "Oh, forget it. Who cares?" Estimated lifetime doses. Now, again, they're only going to talk about cesium because they can only get funding if they played if they want to get funding, rather. Differences in the effects of radiation on the abundance of animals in Fukushima, Chernobyl. The Chernobyl Tissue Bank. Now, Geraldine Thomas has flown all over the world telling people it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. And she's actually in charge of the studies being produced for thyroid cancers from Fukushima. And this is 100% criminal, but it's not illegal to do what she's doing. The Congress, the parliaments, your governments in the nuclear countries that have this stuff don't have the authority by design to make it illegal to poison you. They have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with 3,000 chemicals in your supermarkets, and they do. Right, so they don't get in your supermarket because they're poisonous to you. But they don't have the authority to ban this, and you get a single atom in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells to build a tumor around it. But at the same time, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light, it's wrecking chromosomes and cells and DNA throughout your whole body. Every second, your body tries to repair that and attack the source and build a tumor around it, / sarcophagus, because it's a foreign object. That goes on for the rest of your life. So every time you get an atom in your body, it's there permanently, it's electrically charged, it's exploding every second, almost at the speed of light, almost at the speed of light. So it just tears through, and it causes permanent lesions to your organs. So these health consequences are crazy. Geraldine Thomas should be on death row if it was legal in the United Kingdom. The worst human imaginable to do stuff like this, come out and downplay it. Incidences of legal abortion in Sweden after Chernobyl. Incident of legal abortion in Sweden. Yeah, well, Sweden wasn't blind. Sweden wasn't stupid. Sweden knew the effects of Chernobyl. These are hard pictures, but you can't appreciate how much danger we're in without appreciating that this is radioactive fallout. Long way away. Done this to children. Ionizing radiation in the human gender proportions at birth. A concise review of literature, complementary analysis of historical and recent data. Ionizing radiation in human gender proportions. Right? So human gender is the same as sex ratio studies, where they're looking and the reason they do that study is because they know everybody's poisoned in that area. It doesn't have to be a nuclear meltdown. They're hemorrhaging from the fuel pool, so they're guaranteed to be able to get funding to do the studies. And they love different academics and institutions doing the same study, not seeing the other studies, so they can have a consensus. Taxpayers pay for all of it. And then when the studies are produced, they're locked behind a paywall, so you can't extrapolate on your own. Legally induced abortions in Denmark after Chernobyl. Well, like the abortions in Denmark and Norway and Sweden and everywhere was because of radioactive fallout. And so the fuel pools are doing the same thing. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Each fuel pool would produce, if it just started up tomorrow, produces a plume that covers the whole planet in about 20 days. And that's permanent. It never stops after that. Now add 1,000 of them doing that, so every tree leaf, every blade of grass is contaminated, and has every root, every facet of the root has. They have studied every facet of the ecosystem from every institution on the planet over and over and over for radioactive fallout, because it's there and they need to downplay it in case it comes up. Pregnancy outcome in Finland after Chernobyl. Delays effects of accidental radiation exposure. 15 years of follow-up. Look at all the people in that study. All of these studies, by the way, are meant to downplay the radiation. It happened, but we're going to downplay it. Pregnancy outcome in Norway after Chernobyl. Why are they doing all these types of studies? Early infant mortality in West Germany. Chernobyl's a long way away. So Chernobyl tells you, we got an exclusion zone. That way you're safe. No. This covers the whole planet right away. And these studies are the proof. You're not doing these studies for something to do. You're doing it so you can play it down. Trends in birth and birth rate sex shows the vicinity of research reactors. These are very low megawatt reactors. A lot of people just write them off. This is little tiny reactors. No. if you're doing birth-sex ratios in the vicinities because you're guaranteed everybody has got contaminated, and you're looking for that result now. So these are by proxy disease factors. That's what a nuclear plant is, and a nuclear dump and a nuclear holding site, nuclear waste sites. These are perpetual disease factories hemorrhaging into your environment. You're under siege. You're under attack. These are biological weapons, which is what doctors in the 50s and 60s outside of the industry described the radioactive fallout effects as biological weapons. Human sex ratio, and I mean, people that didn't know each other in different countries were describing it the same way. Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximities to nuclear facilities in France. They're such interesting studies because they acknowledge that everybody, in order to do that study and quantify it, you've got to be assured that everybody was contaminated, say in 50 miles circumference. And they would get the same results if they go to 100 miles, by the way. Population exposures of iodine-131 releases from Hanford. What's the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod? It's not iodine, it's curium isotopes, which is unbelievably significant. If you're just trying to show reason, you'd never seen those studies earlier, you need to go back later and watch that, because that brings it all together for you. Chernobyl cover-up. Yeah, there's thousands and thousands of studies disappeared. Just like they were physical studies before the internet came along, right? They just disappeared. Radioactive fallout neural tube defects. You know, neural tube defects, that's neural tube defect right there. These are neural tube defects right there. This is neural tube defects, so-called neural tube defects. That's congenital malformation, congenital heart diseases. And congenital heart diseases, you know, if you look up Chernobyl hearts, where the children are getting open heart surgery to correct future disfigurations and stuff. Global implications of Chernobyl. So Chernobyl is not limited to the exclusion zone. It's global, which means your food source, your water, your air, permanent. Potential for disease initiation by inhaling beta-emitting nuclear particles. Well, there it is right there. Abandoned, ostracized. The nuclear industry could fix all of that. They can just anonymous donations. They can be like that old Christmas movie where wealthy people would go to the orphanages and drop off extravagant treats for the children so they can have some semblance of a Christmas, right? And they do it anonymously. They show up, they just leave it at the door and run away. The nuclear industry could do the same for these children, and they refuse to do it. And you'd be amazed at how many children are like that because of the nuclear industry. We're talking tens of millions worldwide. Infant mortality after Chernobyl. Look at the people in the study. They're paying mortgages. They're taking cruise vacations with their families. They're sending their children to private school. They're enrolling them in academics and sports and competitions and all kinds of stuff with the money they're making from these studies. And all you got to do is downplay it. And they can get big, beautiful houses and pretend they're important. And pregnancy outcome in Sweden. In order to get to Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, and contaminate 9,400 sheep farms, because as everybody knows, radiation only attacks sheep farms. You're supposed to abandon Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom, see? And they would never acknowledge nothing like that again, right? But back then they panicked and said, well, we'll abandon the sheep farms because everybody loves sheep meat, right? And we'll tell them they're okay. We won't sell the sheep meat. We'll buy it off the farmers. The farmers will be happy. And then we'll just incinerate it. Right? That was their oh shit plan when it happened. Now they're just ruthless scum. I mean, they're ruthless. The current generation of the inbreeds from that generation back then. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden. Or effects of a accident at the Chernobyl atomic energy plant on the outcome of pregnancies. Dental abnormality in people living in radionuclide contaminated region. You ever seen Britain's highly contaminated areas from wind scale, Sellafield, some serious dental, abnormal retinal pigment, a major determinant for radiation-induced congenital eye defects. Leukemia incidences after iodine exposures. Like, you can't just release iodine, 131. In 131, the biggest byproducts are curium isotopes with tens of thousands of years half-life and hideous effects. Now, iodine's not a joke, don't get me wrong. Iodine and cesiums are real. They're a problem, but if I was to be asked, well, what is my biggest concern, it would be the curium isotopes, obviously. Defects of radiation on the reproductive system. So they know that reducing the emissions from a site are catastrophic consequences. Because then there's no incentive. Where do they draw the line? Oh, we can't do it unless we release absurd amounts every day. Canada does that with the CANDU reactors. 16,400,000 trillion atoms a year of tritium-3H alone legally into the environment because they can't contain it. So they just, oh, well, it's harmless. It's like a banana and a potato chip. Have a nice day, stupid. Prenatal irradiation-induced brain and cognitive impairments. Prenatal, and so when the children are born, this is what they look like. And then they're abandoned, right, and left to, and the idea is, the industry got no problem with this, because if this gets traction, especially on YouTube, this day and age, it could really throw a huge wrench into any kind of nuclear so-called renaissance. It's not going to happen. These children are the direct result of radiation, and the United States regulatory agency, which is typically copied by worldwide regulatory agencies, are going to allow even more of this stuff that caused these effects into the environment. Should we draw some kind of a line? Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. That's a crazy study. So atmospheric is the implications of a worldwide, right? Down syndrome in Scotland after Chernobyl. Oh, well, they closed all the sheep farms, Dana. It must be from something else. It's your tin cans, your pop bottles, your cardboard, Dana. How do we do? How do you do? Yeah, we got censored there earlier. That was nasty. Well, they know they can hack me now, but they can't take me down because the equipment I'm using isolates me from the operating system, right? Hello, everybody. Let me think about I'm not sure if I'm going to do a show tomorrow night. I'm just worn out. And I got a hard day for me tomorrow to try to get some equipment functional. Major screw-ups today. Well, not on my fault, but I'm not beat yet. Let's put it that way. Still got a few tricks left up my bum, up my sleeve. One more. Schizophrenia. So you're bioaccumulating all these isotopes. Every isotope, if you get 1,000 isotopes and you live long enough, that's 1,000 tumors. That's 1,000 isotopes that are in your body pulsing energy at the speed of light in every direction, wrecking chromosomes and cells and DNA. So your body is flooding your entire body constantly every second for the rest of your life, permanent. White blood cells. The white blood cells are going to displace the red blood cells. The red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. So schizophrenia, you look like schizophrenia. Alzheimer's, dementia, autism and Down syndrome included. But Alzheimer's and dementia, you're seeing it in young people. Like you used to see when I was young, like really young, I remember there's a person on the East Coast that a kid had cancer, and the whole island donated money for that kid because it was so unusual. Now, if you don't have 3 kids on every street with cancers, and something's wrong. There must be something wrong in that street there. I don't want to live there. Schizophrenia is, and because the ocean stopped producing oxygen, so I think that's an interesting equation you're talking about. Your body's flooded with radiation, so you have less oxygen, so you're going to act very strange. You're more capable. We expected road rage, air rage first to become more prevalent, and also road rage then, right? But because you're up higher, you got less oxygen. So we were talking about that in the first number of years, the first 5 or 6 years, we talked about that a lot, brought that up a lot. And you have the oceans are producing less oxygen because the radioactive fallout, when it covered the whole planet within 20 days, and then so all the freshwater, saltwater, surface water areas were like a snowstorm landing on them. These were particulated isotopes. And what I mean by that is they're fuel particles. And so each particle is splitting atoms into the environment. So normally like an isotope is an isotope, right? It's an iodine or a cesium or uranium, plutonium or americium or neptunium or whatever. And it pulses energy every second, every direction. That's catastrophic. Fuel, atomizing and aerosoling, creates a plume that covers the whole planet of particulates. And wherever they're landing, they're splitting atoms for millions of years into the environment. These are assassins. Each one of them are assassins. You're talking about a snowstorm covering your planet immediately and the surface of the ocean, for instance, and all the way to the ocean floor suspended, all the way through the water column in the upper lower troposphere. So every time it rained, it was catastrophic wherever it landed. But at the surface of your freshwater and your oceans is your phytoplankton. This is the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. But it's the basis of the oxygen chain. So just the Pacific produced over 50% of the oxygen for the planet. So you get rid of that, so you have a lot less oxygen being produced. That's going to catch up at some point. And you're going to expect to see more animal attacks and stuff like that because there's nothing to eat out in the forest anymore, for instance, for predators. And then the people are producing less oxygen. So that's going to play out pretty rough over the next decade until. Crime rates are going to be nuts because people are going to do stuff that's not characteristic of them because they have so much. They add tobacco or alcohol into that equation, which alcohol you get drunk by displacing oxygen molecules. So it takes a lot less to get inebriated, so to speak. And then people that are used to drinking, binge drinking, blackouts are just, you don't have to drink much and they black out. So loosening radiation exposure rules won't speed up nuclear energy production. It won't minimize the radioactive fallout from the fuel pools, which has never been into a conversation. We've never had a conversation. I'm the only person on the planet that has that conversation. Well, there's fuel pools. Yeah, so what? That's used, Dana. They don't do that with me. They don't go near me. I'm not allowed in that conversation. We're so good at this, I'm not bragging, but we can't be beaten in this conversation about nuclear. This is an educational program, so you can't be beaten either. You have to realize how good you really are. A lot of people are like, I'm okay, Dana. Well, yeah, but like the stuff I'm teaching, and you're here on a regular basis every week or multiple times a week, for instance, or a few times a month, you become, when challenged, you will become incredibly articulated. You might doubt it right now, But because this, that's the secret of the things I do for all these years is repeat myself, right? Nail down the narrative, right? So that it's incredibly articulated, and then repeat that repeatedly all the time, right? And so what ends up happening to people, and they don't realize it, is you're a weapon. I'm weaponizing everybody out there with facts, that's all, right? I'm honest and sincere and genuine. And so when that comes across, obviously, long-term, because you see this consistency, right? And this is how you beat them ultimately, because they have captured your regulatory agencies, your universities, for goodness sakes, and all your medias. But ultimately, this comes back now because there was never another solid narrative out there, unfortunately, right? And I looked, and it's the same as the research expeditions. Nobody was doing it, so we sort of here we go. And goodness gracious, we weren't expected. Buy a smoke detector. You're inviting a tiny source of radiation, americium, into your home. 241. So they're making a couple of billion a year of smoke detectors with americium 241. Yeah, it's got a little tiny bit in there. Multiply that by several billion, and you're talking tonnages and tonnages every year. And then people throw that into their garbage when it breaks because they're dirt cheap. They're dirt cheap. And they go into the incinerators, and you can't destroy the americium. You liberate it into the environment. Now it's a problem for anything with replicating cells forever and ever and ever because of its enormous long half-lives. I'll bring that up, actually. Now, I want to do a show tomorrow night, but I'm kind of honest with myself because I know how tired I am, how worn out I am, and how much I really need a vacation, but I can't take one. Which is a good thing because I really like what I'm doing. It's necessary, right? I would like to go on a world's cruise, like the academics will lie to you all the time. That would be cool too. Blah, 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 blah. What the hell? Why can't I find that? There it is. There. I gotta move it back up to the top of the page. There we go. I'll bring it over for you now here, actually. Oh, I didn't have it queued up. Here we go. Or no, I'm an idiot. This is it here. Now what have I got done? Why is that black? Just give me 1 second. Oh, I see. No, that's not what I see. Makes no sense. By smoke detector, you're inviting americium 241. That's plugged in. I can see it on the screen. I can do it this way, I guess. Americium. I better look up there, I guess. Right by curium, americium 241. Has a half-life of, that's 242, Dana. I was going to say, I know it doesn't have a 16-hour half-life. It's a 432-year half-life. What does it decay to? Neptunium 237. That's a forever life on that one. 10 to the power of 6 times 2.1. But anyway, so this is around for 4,300 years, right? Because there's 10 half-lives. I don't know why I'm looking at that way for. Oh, there it is. Oh, that's right, because we got booted off and I didn't. That's why. So if it does that, then it shows up. Gotcha. Just keep going here. By smoke detector, there's no resistance, right? So your children's room, how many times have you left a smoke detector on the bed or on a desk or out in the open? Or this is decaying every second into your environment on top of that to keep you safe, right? Oh, well, the radiation keeps you safe. That's the conflation that they're doing there. Despicable people, eh? U.S. regulates the amount of radiation people exposed to using something called a linear no-threshold model. So no matter how small the radiation is, it adds a small risk to health. No, a single atom will ultimately end up in a tumor. I'm not going to go through all the lies in this story, but all of these stories are full of lies to promote the nuclear industry. As a nuclear reactor proliferates, Trump is scaling. The reactors are not proliferating. There is no nuclear renaissance. There is no increase of reactors in the United States or Canada or anywhere else. The Canadian small modular reactor is a skyscraper. I done a whole presentation on that a few days back. And it's really, really good. I do say so myself. And I do. It blows it away, right? And then I look at the Russian and China's, because they talk about a small modular reactor. These are skyscrapers. Yeah, there is no small modular reactor. If there was a small modular reactor, we wouldn't be building the boiling water reactor X300 in Canada, and many other countries are planning on if we pull it off. It takes 14 years to build it. You got geothermal. Why are we talking about reactors when we have geothermal everywhere? They're pulling away from what keeps us safe all these years. No. The linear no threshold doesn't matter because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging directly into your environment 24 hours a day. There's no containment. And there's a lot more fuel in the fuel pools than there are reactors by orders of magnitude. Right? The whole nuclear industry, the industry writes all these articles, and then the journalists at these medias that are part of that entity will put their name on the story. They don't write them stories. Nuclear is a very complicated story. These scumbags and bird brains are not writing these stories. Right? They quote this apologist and that apologist. Like when you're quoting somebody from a national laboratories, like Idaho National Laboratory or the rest of them, these are degenerates. These are the worst humans imaginable. If you look at the studies they produce, they're terrifying how evil they actually are, these people. Yeah, it's been a tough week trying to get things done. And I'm pumping myself up for confidence to pull it off, but it's not working. I haven't given up yet. I had a major setback today, but I worked all evening, and then tomorrow I'll pick up again. It was just, I was into the city to pick up stuff again today, right? Because that's the only way I'm going to get it done. I got no choice but just to go ahead and do it. And there's very, very consequences for it. But I'm hoping the world will change in the next few months. New nuclear safety rules reduce protection for workers and the public. No, it doesn't. You're being hammered by 1,000 fuel pools are splitting atoms directly into the environment from an enormous amount of reactor cores in each fuel pool. So a reactor core is still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses for millions of years. That's why fuel is dangerous. They'll never tell it to you. They'll say, oh, well, it's dangerous. You can't get close to it. Of course you can't get close to it, stupid. It's in the bottom of a great big pool. The pool is boiling off 120,000 to 200,000 liters each directly into the environment. Each of them produces this plume after 20 days. And then because it never stops producing the plume, this plume is continuous now forever. And the biggest emissions is the curium isotopes. Let me give you a quick example of that, maybe. Back over here. I got it this time. We know what curium is too. Lord knows, we know what the curium isotopes are too. Look at 244 is a big byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod. It's got an 18-year half-life, for instance. It decays to plutonium-240 and then uranium-236. And plutonium-240 is a nasty isotope, by the way. It's got a 6,000-year half-life. But what's crazy about it is that's nasty for 6,000 years. But this is you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for the curium. And that's there for 180 years. There won't be any humans left, or species left on this planet in 100 years. Unless they're genetically modified some magical way. They're all Spider-Mans and Hulks. So the plume covers the planet. No matter what nuclear meltdown or what releases you release, it doesn't take much to create a plume that covers your whole planet. It doesn't have to be a massive explosion with 9 reactor cores ejected out of the buildings. A non-regulatory commission proposes modernization of radiation protection rules, reaffirm the current safety standards. Reaffirm, there is no safety standards. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress and Parliament doesn't have the authority, only the Regulatory Commission, which is absurd that you gave it, and every 4 years each administration appoints a new nuclear regulatory commission. And they're the goblins of the industry for its legacy that are retiring and gets this cushy job to put the nail in humanity's and the species' coffin. They're the epitome of stupid. To let anybody in the industry participate in that kind of decision making. Okay, so there's another way I want you to think about this industry. So you take your loved ones to the hospital because they got cancer. And there's nothing you can do, and the doctors, after you begged them, they said, well, there's radiation therapy. How do I use radiation, doctor? Well, we can inject chemicals into their body and see how that plays out. It hasn't cured anybody yet. And so it doesn't work. Now you say, well, doctor, let's try the radiation. And they're like, yeah. In Canada, it's like, well, we got $900,000. And then they'll send them home. Or you liquidate your assets to give them a few weeks of comfort while they're dying and pay for the funeral. And we all been there, right? Introduction to radiation injury, another silent epidemic. So radiation therapy is the equivalent of murder. It's a 2% so-called where you live more than 5 years. You live a much better life if you don't do it. Radiation-induced injuries to the eyeballs, radiation injuries to your heart, radiation injuries to your breasts, radiation-induced injuries, cardiac injuries, radiation-induced kidney injuries. So you get radiation therapy, and this is what happens to your body. All these radiation attributes will show up. Blood-spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system radiation injuries. And do you think really after all these years, they still haven't come to the conclusion, well, it doesn't work? They're always like, no, we got another concoction. There's thousands of isotopes. We should try this concoction. A little bit of americium, some neptunium, some strontium. Stick it in that needle and jam it into them. They're going to die anyway. Let's see what it does. And I'm not kidding you, this is what they're like, right? They're sadistic, demented, twisted, spineless, heartless chicken necks. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. My favorite ones haven't come up yet. Radiation injury to lower gastrointestinal tracts. Use laser treatment. Yeah, let's try laser treatment. You're going to die anyway. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. You had a little tumor in your skin, and now you got radiation kidney injuries, radiation injury litigations, radiation central nervous system radiation injuries. We can use proton beam therapy. Is it going to help? Well, no, not really. Because when you do that to your brain or to any other part of your body, the rest of your body goes into within a short period. Well, you're going to kill every cell in your body and hope you got the tumor cells. That's what they've been doing for decades. Never worked, so why do they keep doing it? Because people don't question it. People are incapable. And they laugh about it. Look at, if you go listen to interviews of Geraldine Thomas, who does the radiation therapy, she laughs about it. When the mothers are scared because of the child, sometimes she's like, okay, well, it don't matter. I got 100 children waiting to get in there for me to kill them anyway. Probably to protect the lungs from radiation-induced injuries. The best way to protect yourself from radiation-induced injuries is not get radiation. Because radiation injuries is everywhere. It attacks everything in your body. Like they have to use separate sewer systems for the excrements from the victims. The radiation victims are kept in lead-lined rooms so they don't radiate the hospital staff in the hallways. What they call $1 million rooms. Do they survive? No. The 2% that survive for 5 years have diminished their life. They would have lived for 10 or 15 if they'd never done it. And they would have had an okay life. And one day the doctor would say, well, they got stage 4. You had a couple of weeks left. But the rest of those 15 years, you lived in bliss. You went and got radiation therapy, and there's just misery for your horrible existence, right? And you didn't deserve that. Your loved ones didn't deserve that. Every hospital in North America is murdering your loved ones. It's absurd that we're having this conversation that nobody else is. Radiation-induced regional lung diseases. Radiation-induced brain injuries. I got a whole folder on just radiation brain injuries. Never cured anybody. We'll get it there yet. It could be another couple of decades, a couple of centuries. We'll get it. If they cure anybody, they'll put them in a transport truck with glass walls, and they'll take them out to every school, and the students will come in and they'll gawk at him. He survived radiation? No way. Wow. That's crazy. Click, get a picture, put it up on your Facebook. Small bowels radiation injuries. Is there anything radiation doesn't destroy in your body once you start? Nothing. Everything gets destroyed. Intestinal syndromes. Vitamin C uptake may save lives after a radiation accident. Best way to save lives after a radiation accident is no radiation. And don't live within 100 miles of these disease factories that are hemorrhaging into your environment. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. And it's shocking how many people hate my guts. In the nuclear industry, hate me. They do everything they can for free just to attack me and destroy me. Because they're terrified their friends and families and loved ones are going to watch me and realize what kind of monster they really are. And they are monsters. They are monsters. The fun's not over yet, kiddies. Radiation-induced gastrointestinal. But look at all the names in that study. They're not going to make any money if they stop doing it, if they stop using radiation. The only reason all of these people are making a fortune is because you kill all these victims. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. See these people in that study? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 people or something. Radiation-induced normal tissue injury. There is nothing normal about this. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Man, I got so many of those studies. Why would you do that to another human? It's legal, Dana. Can't be held accountable. There was a nuclear terrorism case that was making its way through the courts. And And I'm trying to remember the name of that folder. I can't remember off the top of my head. And they said it's not illegal. They submitted a fact that the lawyers for the plaintiff, or for the I can't remember that now. The guy on trial, his lawyers submitted that a dismissal because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation, and that only the nuclear regulatory has the authority to do it. So therefore, you can't charge somebody with terrorism for trying to hurt you with radiation because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. It's not illegal. And what was that study? It's not illegal. My goodness, I can't believe I can't go looking for it right now because we're making good time here. We're kicking ass. We're kicking ass. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injury. Of all the people in this study. Radiation injury to the heart valves. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. This is radiation therapy. All of this is radiation therapy, the results of radiation therapy. So how come they haven't learned their lesson? Radiation rectal injuries, radiation lung injuries, glands during radiation therapy. Radiation therapy-induced brain injuries, radiation therapy-induced brain injuries, radiation-induced brain injuries after proton radiotherapy. Calling it radiotherapy is a license to murder every single person that comes in front of you in every single hospital. Why is the world so naive? Why is nobody talking about this stuff? I had an epiphany one day, and I can't remember, it was Elsevier Springer Royally Journal, and I typed in radiation therapy, and holy goodness. I think I stopped at around 1,800 studies or something, and I was exhausted. I was exhausted. And it was days and days and days. I had that on my TV screen, and it was just rolling through it like a montage. And so every time I looked up, this is what you'd be looking at it, and you're not thinking about nothing. You're not thinking about what you're looking at, and then slowly your brain goes, look somewhere else. And then when I'm sleeping at nighttime, this is what I'm seeing at nighttime too, the same thing. What you're looking at now is what I typically see, this kind of stuff, because I'm at it all day, and then I'm telling the story at night. Brainstem injuries, is a phenomenon that's well known for people that do repetition stuff, where they start to see it in their dreams and their sleeps. Brainstem injury after intensive modulated radiation therapy. Intensive radiation therapy. Brainstem injuries. Now they know this is going to happen to the next person and the person after and the next one and the next one and 10,000 down the road. It's still going to happen to them. Look at all the people in this study. Language decline after brain radiation therapy. They didn't need all of these people to do that study for that to be knowledgeable, for that to be aware. They're aware of that. Everybody's aware of that. Radiation-induced brain injury after radiosurgery of the brain. Radiosurgery. That takes some nerves to say that one. Radiosurgery of the brain. Anybody ever tells me that's what they do for a living, I'm going to kick the shit out of them right on the spot. Recurrent brain tumor, and there's nothing I can do about it. When I get in front of a jury, the jury's going to say not guilty. He couldn't help it. He snapped. It's understandable. If I was him, I would have snapped too. I can hear the jury right now. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Radiation therapy. Study on radiation-induced brain injuries. Don't worry. Get radiation therapy. Be happy. That'd make a nice sticker. Don't worry, it's only going to kill you. It's radiation therapy is your friend. Radiation therapy is your friend. Radiation brain injury. Never heard of it. No way. Really? It's got some bad attributes to it? No, it's got lethal attributes to it. Radiation-induced brain injuries. I want me some of that. If Trump kids had got radiation therapy and he's seen the results, he wouldn't be promoting what he's doing. Radiation-induced brain injuries, I can tell you that much. Oh, I know I've seen radiation-induced brain injuries. What else is there? Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention radiation brain injuries to anybody? How about radiation-induced normal brain injuries? What is a radiation-induced normal brain injury? So if you use radiation in the brain, there is an injury that's considered normal for every single person. Well, yeah, we reduced the tumor, but we caused a couple more on the tumors. These are maniacs, eh? The best way to describe the nuclear industry is lunatics, every single one of them, and monsters. And chicken eggs, of course. Every time a car backfires within a mile of them, they'll crap in their pants. Every time. Because they know if the world realizes what they've done, if their friends and families realize who they actually are, I can see Mom and the kids now. Okay, kids. Daddy's home from radiation, giving people radiation therapy. Be on your best behavior. For God's sakes. Radiation-induced normal brain injury. That's the most iconic. No, it's normal. It's totally safe, though. It's normal. Well, the way they see it, you're not going to live anyway. And there's $900,000 at stake in Canada. And the United States will kidnap your kids under 19, right? And under guard at the hospital, give them radiation therapy. Canada does the same thing. You got to take it. There's no other cure. There's never been a cure. Radiation not a cure. There's no other treatment, they'll say. They got to get radiation therapy. They're under 19. They got cancer. No, every kid under 19's got cancer. Every kid must die. Mitigate radiation-induced brain necrosis, an experimental study in 2020. Really, been doing it for 80 years and it's still experimental. How to mitigate radiation-induced brain necrosis. Well, radiation brain necrosis from radiation therapy is you're destroying the mental capacity and the ability of the brain to function. You're creating a vegetable. And so all of these heartless scum are doing these studies is to quantify more radiation therapy. Well, we got to tweak it a little bit here and tweak it a little bit there. Microwave-induced brain injuries. Look at all the studies on that. On my other site, before they took it down, no explanations, just disappeared me. Injury to the brain from radiation therapy with whole brain. Proton magnetic resonance spectroscopic. In other words, they blasted you with many sieverts of radiation. 3 sieverts is considered a lethal dose for the average person in multiple organs. Brain radionecrosis after adjuvant radiation therapy. When they say they're going to do radiation therapy, that's code for we're going to kill you slowly. And then when you're ready to die, we'll send you home so we don't have to look at you. Cognitive impairment in young patients treated with radiation therapy for a brain tumor. Cognitive impairment in young patients. Well, is there any other result from radiation therapy, Dana? No. And a brain tumor means they're going to wreck the head, right? They're lunatics. They're exterminating you. That's all the fuel pools surrounded by farms. They're exterminating you. And when you get sick from eating that food and go to the hospital, they're going to exterminate you. They hate you. That's the bottom line. Aging masses detection of radiation-induced brain injuries. Oh, no, well, he was going to get dementia and Alzheimer's anyway. I had to try it. There's nothing else we can do. And there's tons they can do. There's no money in cures. Radiation-induced soft tissue injury to the head and neck. Soft tissue. Late radiation rectal injuries. Yeah, cancer-free now for a year. Wake up one morning, you can't sit on the toilet or a chair anymore. You gotta get on your knees because you need to rest. And you get to the doctor and he says, yeah, you got late radiation rectal injury, my boy. We got to get you in there, give you some radiation therapy. I can hear all the nurses out there giggling now. You getting radiation therapy again? Get that needle ready, Chimmy. Look at all the people on the studies. They don't. Do you think all these people would speak out and say this doesn't work? How come? None of them speaks out and say this doesn't work. There was one study that spoke out. I've never seen any more studies from that person, unfortunately. Surgical treatment of chest wall radiation-induced injuries. Let's just lower the releases from the local plants to the communities. It doesn't matter. They're going to get sick anyway because they're eating food from those farms surrounding the plant. It doesn't really matter. You can't stop the emissions from the plant. Reducing, there is no restrictions on the emissions from the plant. The fuel pools have these big, tall, skinny stacks. Let's put some restrictions on that. Let's build a repository and put all the nuclear scientist kids down there. Radiation injury to the nervous system. Sounds like apple pie. Radiation-induced skin necrosis. The death of most of all the cells in the organ or tissue, necrosis. Radiation injury to the canine spinal cord. Radiation-induced death from radiation therapy. It's always radiation death, ultimately. Brain radionecrosis from radiation therapy. Radiation therapy. The nuclear industry's best friends. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Late radiation injuries, radiation therapy to breast cancer patients. Radiation-induced spinal cord injuries. Radiation injuries to the growth plate. Radiation injuries to the lung injuries. Radiation injuries in intestines. Radiation pulmonary injuries. Radiation therapy-induced cardiac injuries. Radiation therapy, cardiac injuries. Radiation injury to the nervous system, the central nervous system. Radiation injuries to the spinal column. Radiation injuries to the optic nerves. Radiation injuries at the lower digestive tract. Is there anything the radiation doesn't injure, I wonder? And these injuries are fatal. Radiation injury in the human kidneys. Yummy. Radiation-induced cognitive impairment. Yay! This is what they play at their parties, these ticker tape rolls. You know, if you can buy these huge projectors. They're expensive, like $100,000. And you can project it on like a big building. So imagine going to a radiation therapy place, hospitals, and projecting these types of ticker things on the wall when the patients are showing up. They're sitting there reading that before they go in. They're like, I don't know, honey. Radiation-induced insufficiency fractures the femur 18 years after radiation therapy. Radiation 18 years later. Get you. I'm surprised you lived that long. Radiation-induced ocular injury in the dog. No, they had no idea, Dana. All of these people that done these studies should be charged with crimes against humanity, shouldn't they? Surgical treatment of radiation injuries of the colon and rectum. Yummy! I want some of that. Give me some of that. Microwave radiation injury, they get you everywhere. I done a whole presentation 10 years ago, 12 years ago or something, on cell phone radiation injuries. And it was like a 2-hour presentation of studies and documentation. And it was at the time, it was just mind-blowing. And they took the video down because they said I had nudity in the video. There was nothing but studies. Hard cases, eh? Summary of symposium on acute radiation. They have symposiums We're like, I don't know, man. Every patient is dying from the radiation. We need a new concoction. A little bit of uranium, plutonium maybe this time. Let's go hard. Let's go hard. We got to get that tumor. We'll get it. Yeah, they're going to get all kinds of other tumors and radiation illnesses and diseases. But don't worry about that. That's going to happen anyway. So let's try to get rid of the tumor, and we can kind of tweak it later in a couple of years' time for the next row of victims coming through our hospitals. Summary of symposium on acute radiation injuries. Oh, microwave-induced brain injuries. Yummy. Radiation-induced skin wounds. We're almost through this, believe it or not. We're just another 6 or 7, and then we're going to, I guess we'll call it quits at that point. Late radiation-induced rectal injuries after treatment of cancer of the uterus. Oh, that's a double nut. What a dirty thing to do to a human, eh? That's called contempt. They're not going to send their own kids there. None of these people will send their own kids for radiation therapy, I can tell you that much. Surgical treatment of intestinal radiation injuries. Radiation-induced chronic arterial injuries. Several decades after radiation therapy. If you live that long, you've got a pretty diminished life. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, to be born on Sugar Mountain. Just bear with me. La 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 la. I'm getting there. Let me see what I'm doing here. We ran into a lot of expenses that I can't keep up with. I'm doing the best I can. I can do so much more if I was given the opportunity. It's too bad a foundation won't pick us up. Several decades, people should be contacting foundations saying, yeah, hey, you know. Several decades after radiation therapy, I got 2 more to go. Radiation-associated cancer risk among injured children treated at different trauma centers. I got to use radiation. Yeah, that's going to freak them up, but like, you don't need to use x-rays. You can use lights, right? We have computer topographies, computer software now that can do a better job than an x-ray. No adverse side effects. Impaired wound healing after radiation therapy. Yeah, you killed all the good stuff in the body can't heal. And that's it for us tonight. That's all she wrote. We got a really good song for closing. That's pretty cool. We got a nice, because it's, don't worry about all the emaciated whales. We broke the food chain with Fukushima. Radiation can't hurt the whales anymore in a couple of years because there'll be no whales left. So, 2 birds, 1 stone. What's going to happen in the near future is instead of going to jail, you're going to get radiation therapy. The Enrichment Man. I know we got a request for that yesterday or the day before, Darlene. It's a fantastic song, and it's the same musician, artist, filmmaker as the song we started off with. Links are in the chat room for that, but you go to my playlist and you'll find that song we started off with tonight in the anti-nuclear music, both of them. And we're going to do this song. So you still got a few minutes left to vote on the poll tonight. Let's bring it up one more time. Considering small modular reactors are phantom reactors, they don't exist, is easing the safety rules for unproven small modular reactor nuclear tech reckless. Oh, that's cute. Somebody said no. Oh, bless your heart. You're heartless, I mean. Bless your heartless. So, just bear with me. This is a great song, eh? It's a very educational song. It's got... I'm just going to put a link to that song there for you. La 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 la. It might take me a minute, and then we'll play the song. There it is. Well, I guess it doesn't matter because I just wanted to put it in there. Less work for me over the next few minutes when we shut down here. So I put the link that I'm putting in the chat room, Nate, right now is to the song that we're going to play. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. See everybody. I'm not sure if I'll be back tomorrow night. Please check. I probably will be. But all day I'm thinking about a long weekend for some reason. I need a long weekend just to try to recover from the last couple of days. I'm just old. I'm not defeated. I'm just old. I'll get there. I'm getting there. Yes. Summer's not even here yet, so we're still in good shape. Take care, everybody.
You said the world needs power.
Sorry.
I won't disagree.
Take care.
There's heat in the ground and the wind runs free. You call nuclear the future, but it won't power itself. Nuclear relies on coal more than coal needs itself. You said crypto was coming and demand would explode, that AI would load what the grid couldn't hold. But SMR stay delayed, no ground ever breaks, and the public pays out while the promise remakes. You said it's the hour, but the plan's still the same. The technology is analog from the Cold War days. There's no place for the waste, and yuccas refused. Vented dry cast containers become the only refuge. You say you lead the charge with a federal hand. Would you vote Price Anderson or stand with the land? You call it advanced, but the cycle's well known, still chasing a fuel that should have stayed in the stone. They brought in the waste with no warning or word. No records were filed and no voices were heard. The workers got sick, yet their claims were denied. But their jobs paid well, or so at the time. Say the same line again, just a little more vague. Let the cost wash away while the lobbyists wave. It's the same old plan with a new name again. And the public keeps paying again and again. The words that you sign will be printed and praised with a ribbon and stamp on a speech full of praise. This is abundance they'll claim as they lead. But nuclear won't build what the future will